Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's session on ESG disclosure and strategy for PSX listed companies. My name is Minha Hanif, and I'm the climate analyst at Resources Future, where we are passionate about shaping meaningful, sustainable change across energy, infrastructure, and finance. At Resources Future, we work at the intersection of ESG, carbon markets, corporate decarbonization, and helping organizations turn ambition into action. And that's exactly what today is about, understanding how ESG isn't just a reporting requirement, but a catalyst for innovation, resilience, and long-term value. So whether you're joining us from the policy side, corporate world, or the financial space, thank you for being here. We've got a rich session ahead, and I'm looking forward to diving in together. So thank you for your patience. I think we're good to start, and I'll hand over to our speaker for today, which is Amara. So thank you, Amara.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Minha. Firstly, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to you all in today's session on ESG disclosure and strategy for PSX listed companies. We will be talking about compliance, materiality, and value creation. This webinar has been designed specifically for companies that are listed on the Pakistan Stock Exchange with a clear focus on how they can align with regulatory expectations and investor demands using local guidance frameworks. As we all know, ESG disclosure is no longer a niche reporting activity. It is becoming a standard expectation from regulators, investors, as well as supply chain partners. In Pakistan, recently we've seen significant progress in the last few years. The SECP's ESG disclosure guidelines for listed companies and the PSX ESG primer now provide a concrete baseline for voluntary reporting and materiality analysis and alignment with international frameworks such as GRI, IFRS S1, and S2. So, my name is Amara RF05, and I work at Resources Future as a sustainability analyst. Before we move on to today's session, I would like to take you through today's outline. This session will walk you through the evolution of ESG expectations at PSX, outline current regulatory instruments and reporting expectations, while also offering practical steps for integrating ESG into business strategy. We will also look at how companies can prepare for future requirements, especially in the areas of materiality, climate risks, and investor engagement, while creating value for shareholders and stakeholders alike. Throughout this session, we will also highlight how Resources Future can support listed companies through structured ESG services. Our main focus is on simplifying complex frameworks and making ESG actionable for local businesses like yours. Also soon, we will be releasing our report titled ESG and Climate Finance at PSX, which takes a closer look at how ESG adoption is evolving across listed companies and how climate finance instruments like green bonds and carbon markets are gaining traction in Pakistan. So do stay tuned for this full release. Let us begin today's session. Well, what is and why does it matter? Environmental social governance, or known as ESG more popularly, we know has moved from a voluntary public relations exercise to now more of a strategic reporting requirement, especially for listed companies. So in today's session, the main focus will be on what ESG means in the context of Pakistan Stock Exchange and how listed entities can position themselves to align with both regulatory expectations and market trends.
Hi, just a second. I think we can.
Sorry, just a second, guys.
Just trying to fix the volume, 1 minute.
Hi everybody, test run. Can everybody hear me clearly now? Please use the chat box to let us know. Thanks. Okay. So back to our webinar. So as it has been outlined in the PSX ESG primer, um, that the exchange is encouraging listed firms to embed ESG into business strategy through structured voluntary reporting aligned with international standards. This is further complemented by SECP's ESG disclosure guidelines of 2024, which recommend disclosures that cover environmental performance, social responsibility, and governance structures, ensuring that listed companies provide a holistic view of sustainability practices um, and decision-making processes. I would just like to say that this webinar is not about ticking compliance boxes. It's about understanding how ESG can be a differentiator for investor engagement, market credibility, and long-term value creation. Pakistan's corporate sector is currently in the transition phase, where companies that move on early to ESG integration will definitely gain a competitive edge. So, throughout this session, we will explore the evolution of ESG at PSX, key regulatory frameworks that are now in place, practical implementation tools that can help companies like yours, and ways in which Resources Future can support your ESG and climate disclosure journey, particularly through materiality assessments, IFRS S1, S2 alignment, and capacity building programs. So let's have a look at how ESG evolved at PSX over time. Well, Pakistan's ESG journey within capital markets has followed a progressive, staged trajectory, anchored in regulatory action and exchange-led initiatives. A significant early milestone came in 2019 when SECP revised the listed company's code of corporate governance to institutionalize sustainability oversight. This included provisions for board level sustainability committees and mandatory anti harassment policies embedding ESG into the governance structure of listed firms. In 2021, then the Pakistan Stock Exchange, under the leadership of Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, constituted a multi stakeholder ESG task force. And its role was to develop a coherent, systematic, and very realistic ESG framework that had been tailored for the Pakistani local market. These efforts further culminated in 2022 when SECP released the ESG regulatory roadmap, which outlined a phased approach to building ESG maturity. And it was the same year of 2022 where PSX aligned with global markets by joining the United Nations Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative, known as the SSE, reinforcing its commitment to responsible investment principles and ESG integration. Later on, in 2023, PSX began organizing sector-specific ESG roundtables, including manufacturing and automotives, to support the operationalization of ESG practices within different industry verticals. And then later, by 2024, this effort finally crystallized into the publication of Pakistan's first formal ESG reporting manual for listed companies, the PSX ESG Primer, accompanied by SECP's finalized ESG disclosure guidelines, offering a voluntary but structured reporting pathway that aligned with global standards like IFRS, S1, and S2. I would say that this evolution reflects a broader shift in Pakistan's capital market from like informal CSR efforts to more of a structured ESG regime that is grounded in local relevance and global alignment. I would say that we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. But at least, we're in the transition phase now. So moving on, let us now discuss PSX on driving ESG adoption amongst listed companies. As we all know, Pakistan Stock Exchange has really taken a proactive role in shaping ESG integration across capital markets. It has moved beyond being a traditional platform to a sustainability enabler, particularly for its listed companies. So in 2021, PSX constituted a dedicated ESG task force comprising the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance, and various private sector actors. And this task force was then mandated to create a local ESG reporting framework that balances global alignment with contextual relevance. One of the key inputs of this collaboration was the development of the PSX ESG Primer, um, a voluntary guidance document that provides listed companies with a structured, scalable ESG reporting pathway. We can say that the primer is built to align with global standards such as GRI and IFRS S1 and S2. Yet it is customized for Pakistan's corporate context. So later on, recognizing the importance of global investor access to ESG data, PSX partnered with the London Stock Exchange Group in 2024 to introduce the ESG contributor tool, which we will discuss in detail further on. This tool was there to enable listed companies to submit data for ESG scoring, and this then reflected on global platforms like ICON. This facilitates transparency and comparability for international capital markets, showing that Pakistani listed companies are credible. In parallel, PSX has also launched an ESG information portal, which we will serve as a centralized, which will serve as a centralized platform for ESG disclosures, company benchmarking, and practical tools. We will also discuss this as we move on in today's webinar. Furthermore, PSX says membership in the SSE initiative formalized in back in June 2022, and this signaled that PSX is showing institutional commitment to mainstreaming ESG and promoting responsible investment principles in Pakistan's capital markets. Together, we can say that these initiatives underscore PSX evolution into a sustainability partner, providing not just policy direction, but also tools, platforms, and cross-sector support to embed ESG into corporate reporting and governance. So moving on, we will discuss what the primer is and how it can help. Well, the PSX ESG Primer is Pakistan's first exchanged issue ESG guidance document. It was developed, as I mentioned earlier, by the task force in response to the growing demand from investors, buyers, regulators for improved ESG transparency. As outlined on pages 3 to 6 of the primer, this document is a voluntary yet structured toolkit for ESG reporting by listed companies. It doesn't impose requirements, it empowers action. And the primer translates international ESG frameworks into a locally usable format to make it easier for companies in Pakistan. It also references IFRS S1 and S2 structures, but always within the context of the Pakistan's regulatory, financial, and operational realities. So, what does it offer, and what the key features include? So, they include a modular layout that separates environmental, social, and governance topics, making it easier for companies to start with areas that are most material to them. We will also discuss in detail about materiality as we move ahead. Secondly, the second key feature of the PSX primer is that it is a list of suggested ESG indicators, offering a practical reference to build or improve sustainability disclosures. Sorry. Thirdly, templates and formats are also in it to reduce the reporting burden and help create ESG reports that are comparable and investor ready. Lastly, it focuses on capacity building, where companies are encouraged to start small and deepen disclosure over time. So, for PSX listed companies, especially those that are newer to ESG, this primer, I would say, is not just a document, it can act as a launchpad for you. And it was designed to support voluntary action now while preparing firms for future inclusion in the PSX ESG index and eligibility for ESG linked investments. At Resources Future, we provide listed firms in operationalizing the primer, helping them with materiality assessments, ESG metric selection, and reporting formats that are both practical and globally aligned. Let us move on. Um, I wanted to discuss a little about SECP's ESG guidelines. I understand while our focus today is on the PSX ESG primer, it is still worth noting that SECP's ESG disclosure guidelines complement this document. The SECP provides high-level principles and a policy signal, while PSX offers a practical reporting structure tailored to listed companies. Together, I would say they help companies move from intent to action. We can say SECP sets the why and PSX provides the how. In contrast, the SECP guidelines provide high level direction, establishing the importance for ESG for long term corporate performance and investor trust. While also voluntary at this stage until July 2025, when IFRS S1 and S2 become mandatory. By the way, that deadline is crawling up on all of us, I'm sure. So back to our webinar, the guidelines suggest that these reporting ESG information within annual reports or standalone disclosures is okay. So as mentioned in section 3 of the SECP ESG disclosure guidelines, they reference the PSX primer as a practical resource for implementation. Together, I would say that these two documents again offer both the why and how of ESG reporting in Pakistan. And SECP sets the policy tone, whereas PSX provides the operational pathway. And companies that start using the primer today are not only future proofing themselves for regulatory shifts, they're also making ESG practices more consistent, comparable, and investor ready, making themselves credible. So, building ESG systems that interpret regulatory expectations while aligning with the PSX primer requires, technical insights and structured implementation. This is something Resources Future supports through materiality assessments, baselining, and audit-ready disclosure designs. Let us move on to the next slide. Here, I would like to discuss the role of the board in ESG integration. So, we all know that board oversight is a foundational element of ESG integration, particularly for listed companies. The 2019 Code of Corporate Governance, issued by SECP and applicable to all PSX listed firms, requires boards to take responsibility for sustainability related governance, especially and specifically, it encourages the formation of board level ESG or sustainability committees, signaling that ESG is not just a reporting function, it is now a leadership priority. And as highlighted by the PSX ESG primer, board oversight is critical for driving ESG maturity, and the primer explicitly identifies the board as responsible for A, approving material ESG issues, B, ensuring ESG information is integrated into corporate strategy, and C, validating ESG disclosures that are shared with investors. So, beyond oversight, boards are expected to now lead cultural and operational alignment by ensuring that the executive management team is trained in ESG related risks, disclosure practices, and regulatory expectations. This includes ensuring that the company is prepared for climate related scenario analysis and enterprise level sustainability risk integration. I would just like to say that executive training programs, such as those delivered by Resources Future, supports boards in understanding their ESG responsibility under both the ESG primer and global frameworks like IFRS S1 and S2. So now we come to materiality. This is a very important concept when it comes to ESG, and I just wanted to make sure that I clear it out for you all. So materiality is not just a concept, it is the foundation of an effective ESG reporting. It ensures that disclosures are focused on ESG topics that actually matter to a company's operations, risk exposures, and long-term value. According to the PSX ESG primer, materiality should be determined through both internal business relevance as well as external stakeholder expectations. We can say that this is aligned with leading global frameworks such as IFRS, S1's enterprise value lens, and GRI's stakeholder inclusiveness. So, for listed companies, it is critical that ESG reports do not attempt to report on everything and anything, but instead focus on what is strategically material to the company itself. Something that might be material for company X might not be material for company Y. So it is important to be internally aligned on what is actually material for your company. And so the PSX primer recommends a phased material approach. It says that we should start with high priority topics that may already be under investor or buyer scrutiny. For example, emissions, workforce equity, and governance practices, and then slowly expanding as data systems and stakeholder engagement processes become more mature. A typical materiality process generally includes four core steps: mapping stakeholders, identifying relevant ESG topics, assessing and prioritizing them, and lastly, documenting how those decisions are reflected in the ESG disclosures. So, stakeholder mapping and sector-specific benchmarking and alignment with GRI and IFRS S1 and S2 are now central to ESG reporting. And these are all areas where Resources Future continues to support its clients in preparing investor-grade disclosures. So, um, just a little background about IFRS S1 and S2 for your understanding. So, as we all know, starting July 2025, IFRS S1 and S2 will become mandatory reporting standards in Pakistan. And while they are not mandatory or required yet, the implications are significant for PSX listed companies seeking investor access. So, ESG linked finance or inclusion in cross border supply chains. IFRS S1 generally addresses sustainability related risks and opportunities. It covers governance, risk management, metrics, and targets. It ensures that companies disclose any sustainability factors that could affect enterprise value. It also reinforces the materiality principle, requiring firms to disclose only what is actually relevant to their strategic position and future financial outlooks. Moving on, we have IFRS S2. This is more specific to climate-related disclosures, aligned closely with TCFD, and it requires companies to disclose climate governance, climate-related scenario analysis, and GHG emissions across all three scopes, scope 1, 2, and 3. Um, so the PSX ESG Primer of 2024 strongly encourages alignment with the IFRS S1 and S2 as best practice. And the primer also highlights this framework as global anchors that can help companies build investor trust, improve their credibility, improve risk disclosures and prepare for future regulations or ESG fund inclusion. I'd like to add here that compliance with IFRS S1 and S2 involves scenario planning, emissions baselining, and report preparation in line with international assurance expectations. And clients often seek support through tailored workshops, reporting tools, and governance level trainings. These are all areas where Resources Future provides deep technical guidance. So do feel free to reach out to us for anything that you may need regarding these topics. Let us move on to our next slide. Here, I would like to discuss the contributor tool that I mentioned earlier. So, the ESG contributor tool is a strategic digital platform introduced through a partnership between the Pakistan Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange Group. Um, and this tool enables voluntary ESG disclosures by PSX listed companies, allowing them to directly publish their sustainability data into the Refinitiv ICON system, a platform that is widely used by global institutional investors, ESG ratings providers, and financial analysts. And from a practical standpoint, it actually offers listed companies a pathway to improve their own visibility in global markets by making their ESG performance accessible to the world's most active sustainability focused stakeholders. The contributor tool also allows across ESG indicators that are suggested in the PSX and these basically include environmental metrics such as GHG emissions and energy usage, social indicators like workforce composition, health and safety, and gender diversity, and lastly, governance aspects such as board structure, anti-corruption practices, and executive compensation. I would say that, for companies, this platform standardizes ESG reporting and can be of big help to ensure data consistency across sectors. It is especially useful for firms preparing for future ESG scoring, as early submissions through, these tools can lead to faster ESG visibility on third-party indices, higher chances of being included in ESG funds, and lastly, benchmarking opportunities against both local and global peers. And however, effectively, using this tool still requires internal alignment from within the company of ESG data sources, proper mapping to international frameworks like GRI and IFRS S1 and S2, along with validation of disclosed data. This is where support is often needed, and firms like us, like Resources Future, can assist clients in setting up internal systems, ESG KPIs, and quality controls to disclose through the contributor tool in a way that's both globally credible and locally relevant. Let us move on to our next slide. Here, I'd like to talk to you about the PSX information portal. This naturally connects, to this topic as we're discussing tools. This is another tool that is locally available for listed companies. And so, to further institutionalize ESG reporting, PSX has developed a centralized ESG information portal, and this platform has been designed to serve as a public-facing hub for ESG reports, performance analytics, and technical support tools. So while the ESG contributor tool that we discussed earlier connects companies with global investor platforms, the ESG portal will serve domestic stakeholders, investors, regulators, journalists, researchers, who need this transparent data and comparable ESG data from listed companies. And according to the PSX ESG primer, one of the ongoing barriers to this ESG adoption is data accessibility and comparability. The portal is intended to solve this by offering ESG report hosting, peer benchmarking dashboards, and interactive tools to support alignment with IFRS S1 and S2, as well as sector-specific KPIs. So, for Pakistan Stock Exchange listed companies, this is a good chance to be part of a shared national ESG infrastructure, enhancing stakeholder engagement and increasing eligibility for future ESG indices or financing mechanisms. Let's move on to the next slide, which is on disclosing climate risks, what PSX companies need to know. So, climate change is not just an environmental issue anymore. It has evolved and it is now a financial and operational risk that affects nearly every sector on the PSX. And for Pakistani listed companies, climate risks intersects with rising energy costs, water scarcity, regulatory shifts, and changing investor mandates. The PSX ESG primer has identified climate related risks and emissions as high priority disclosure areas. It is also encouraging companies to quantify their greenhouse gas emissions, identify how climate regulations impact their value chains, and ensure climate considerations are integrated at the board level. So climate risks generally fall into two categories. Firstly, we have physical risks, and secondly, we have transition risks. So physical risks are, for example, extreme heat, flooding, or drought, which may affect supply chains or operational sites, whereas transition risks like um, fuel pricing reforms and climate policies or carbon taxes may increase compliance costs or reshape demand. So for listed companies, we would say that the first step is usually a GHG inventory, tracking scope one, which are your direct emissions, tracking scope two, your purchased electricity, and lastly, scope three, which is your supply chain emissions. And from there on, companies can begin to assess where they are most exposed and how resilient their operations are under these various climate futures. The primer also introduces scenario planning as a simple but powerful way to prepare for emerging climate risks. This doesn't require advanced modeling to begin. Basic stress testing under uh, different assumptions, like, for example, rising fuel prices or shifting investor preferences, can also help build internal awareness and shape early disclosures. So, for developing GHG inventories, conducting baseline assessments, assessing exposure, and introducing climate risk governance are common steps for listed companies that are working towards ESG alignment. And these are areas in which Resources Future continues to support its current clients using both PSX and global frameworks. So now let's zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Um, Pakistan's nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, well, these are the country's climate commitments under the Paris Agreement. And they include a really ambitious target of, 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. And, we are just 5 years away from that. So, using both, of course, domestic efforts as well as international support. Now, while that's a national goal, it won't happen without the support of the private sector, especially energy intensive industries and PSX listed companies. I would say that is where your role becomes critical. So the PSG the PSX ESG primer actually ties directly into this national agenda. It encourages companies to start tracking their emissions, assessing climate risks, and thinking seriously about how low carbon transition plans. So even though the primer is voluntary right now, it is, clearly aligned with where both the market and regulators are eventually heading. Um, so what would this mean for your business? I would say it's not just about checking boxes or avoiding risks. This is actually a very strategic opportunity to lead the way. And companies that align with the NDCs can build stronger ESG profile, improve investor appeal, and access climate-linked funding streams. And this is exactly where we come in. At Resources Future, we support companies to, design emission reduction strategies that reflect national priorities, identify bankable climate actions through our climate investment services, while also building ESG reports that align with local frameworks as well as international frameworks, and as well as, giving our clients access to carbon markets and climate finance to help fund and monetize this very, very important transition. And the more your disclosures and strategies reflect Pakistan's climate direction, the better positioned you will be for ESG funds, supply chain screening, as well as international partnerships. I would now like to take you guys through carbon markets and what it means for companies. So in 2024, I'm not sure if you guys know, but Pakistan released its first carbon market guidelines, and this laid the foundation for a structured and transparent system to issue and trade carbon credits. This aligns with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and supports both national emissions targets and corporate decarbonization. So for PSX listed companies, this is, a game-changing opportunity. Carbon markets offer a dual benefit. Firstly, they allow firms to offset unavoidable emissions through locally verified projects. Secondly, they open new revenue channels via, credit generation, especially for firms in energy, manufacturing, waste, and agriculture. The PSX primer also acknowledges carbon markets as a strategic climate tool. While not mandatory, um, participating in credit generation or offsetting will help strengthen ESG positioning, and it also sends a signal to global buyers and investors. Um, Here, I'd like to add that carbon market participation involves project design, baseline data collection, and alignment with standards such as the gold standard and VCS. So for clients developing biochar, nature-based, or clean energy solution, advisory teams like us also provide market strategy support from credit issuance to pricing decisions. In this way, carbon markets can become a tool for converting climate ambition into financial value. Moving on, we'll just have a look at a quick case study based on a local, very recent example. So, one of the most exciting developments in Pakistan's financial markets happened just last month in March. Parvaz Financial Services launched the Green Action Bond, and it's a big deal. So, this is the first ever PKR denominated green bond to be listed on the Pakistan Stock Exchange. So, what's special about this? Well, it shows that green finance is no longer a future concept. It's finally here. You know, we've been talking about it for so long, and now that it's finally here, it's great for Pakistan. So, investors are now actively looking for credible ESG aligned projects to fund, especially those that, align with climate objectives like clean energy, energy efficiency, or nature-based solutions. Um, but there's a slight catch. It's not just about having a green idea, it's about actually proving your impact. So this is where ESG comes in. And this is why Parvaz's case study is so important for other Pakistani companies. So Parvaz was actually able to tap into this opportunity because they had solid ESG disclosures, project transparency, and alignment with international frameworks. So for listed companies, we can say that this is a really useful blueprint. And if you can show measurable environmental impact, align with frameworks like green bond principles, and back it all up with strong governance structures and disclosures, capital is definitely available and growing. Um, this is where advisory support also actually really comes in. At Resources Future, we help companies move from we want to do something green to actually getting investor ready. This means identifying viable projects, preparing documentation in line with global climate and carbon standards, and making sure that everything's in place to access green and blended finance, especially through platforms like the PSX. So the key takeaway here would be that green finance isn't just a buzzword anymore. It's actionable, and Pakistani companies can be a part of it with the right tools and guidance. So what do investors expect from listed companies in Pakistan? So let's be honest. For investors, ESG data is now a screening tool. It's kind of like the company's initial interview. So not just supporting material. So for most institutional investors, your ESG data is actually the first filter they use. If your reporting is vague, outdated, or not aligned with frameworks like IFRS S1 and S2, your company will be at a risk of being screened out before anyone even looks at your financials. So now, what do investors actually care about when it comes to ESG? Firstly, materiality. They want to know, are you reporting on the issues that truly matter to your industry and your stakeholders? If it feels generic or disconnected from your actual business risks, it won't resonate. So this needs to be a thoroughly uh, and strategically planned out exercise, deciding on what actually is material for your company. Secondly, we have structure. Investors now expect data that is clear because there's so many tools out there. So, and to show that it is comparable over time and tied to risk. So think emissions intensity, workforce diversity, or safety indicators, not just, one-off stats, but proper structured and consistent disclosures. Thirdly, governance. And ESG is not just a PR exercise anymore, everybody. Investors want to see that it's being driven by the board and that it's embedded in your strategy and, complete part of how your business is run, part of your vision and your mission and everything. So that's what the PSX ESG primer really brings home is that it tells listed companies to align with investor expectations, not just tick the regulatory boxes, because that will make you credible and fundable and look attractive to investors. So, if you're aiming for ESG linked capital, whether it's ESG funds, DFIs, or even global buyers, you need disclosures that are material, structured, and aligned with global frameworks as well as audit ready. This is where support, I would like to add in, can make all the difference with the right guidance. ESG reporting becomes more than compliance. It can become a strategic asset for companies. And this is where many companies turn to experienced advisors like Resources Future to help build ESG systems that meet global standards and unlock access to capital and investment partnerships. So the bottom line here is that ESG tells your company's story. And if it's told well, it will definitely bring capital with it. So, ESG, I've said it again and I can't say it enough, is no longer optional. It is a strategic lever. And for PSX listed companies, the pressure to disclose, decarbonize, and align with investor expectations is growing fast. But the good news is you don't have to do it all at once and you don't have to do it alone. Today's session showed and highlighted how tools like the PSX ESG Primer, frameworks like IFRS S1, S2, and initiatives like carbon markets are reshaping how companies report, raise capital, and respond to climate risks. And I would say that it is time now to turn ESG into action, whether it's helping you draft your first ESG report, baseline your carbon footprint, or prepare for investor scrutiny. Please feel free to reach out to Resources Future, and we will support you by bringing structure, clarity, and the right expertise to get it done. So, as we reach the end of our session today, I would just like to tell you how we can help. Our goal at Resources Future is to make ESG strategy and disclosure workable, especially for PSX listed companies, that are navigating new expectations from regulators, investors, and international buyers as it can get a bit overwhelming. We're not a one size fits all firm. Our services are organized around what matters most to you and your company, and our services are customized according to your needs. This can include building credible ESG reports that meet investor and regulatory standards, supporting your net zero journey with carbon baselining, reduction, and reporting. Um, and then delivering board level ESG and climate risk training grounded in frameworks like IFRS S1 and S2. So, whether you're just starting your ES journey or ready to monetize climate performance, we have the right tools, expertise, and insights, along with the expert knowledge to move you forward step by step and standard by standard. Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel and LinkedIn for more insights. And do stay tuned for our upcoming webinars. If you'd like to explore how we can support your ESG journey, feel free to get in touch with us directly. We are always open to connecting on a one-on-one basis to explore how we can support your ESG journey. Um, So please, everyone, feel free to drop in your questions in the chat box, and I will try to answer them as best as I can in the limited time that we have left. If anybody's questions go unanswered, please feel free to reach out to us on email or LinkedIn, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So I'm just going through. Our first question is from Junaid Khalid. Please also shed light on mandatory requirements for listed companies, which, if the company is not compliant, may result in penalties to be imposed by the regulators. Um, well, Currently, no standalone ESG disclosure laws carry direct financial penalties. However, non-compliance with linked governance or ESG frameworks is not like can't say it's punishable, but these provisions will include independent directors on the board and functioning audit and HR committees. And the direction SECP and PSX are heading suggests that mandatory ESG reporting with enforceable penalties may soon be codified. But we are just waiting to see what SECP and PSX say. And companies that ignore these may face, regulatory sanctions, fines, or reputational damage. Hope that answered your question, Junaid. Okay, so next we have Sohaib Tariq's question. Why SECP adopted IFRS S1, S2 before giving companies ample time to report in accordance with PSX plan? Actually, so this we've been on this journey for a while now. It started pretty early. Officially in 2022, the roadmap, SECP's roadmap came out. And, that was an early signal to Pakistan companies that, we have started a global commitment and ESG disclosure standards to ensure our capital markets remain competitive and investable. So I would say we have been on this journey for a while, and they have been hinting at us. Um, okay. Answer two. After adoption of IFRS, PSX primer and ESG disclosure guidelines um, appear repealed. I'm sorry, Shoaib, I don't understand this question. If you could just write it again in the text box or feel free to email me and I'll get back to you. Has SECP issued any guidance document on how to implement IFRS in accordance with local context? So, as I mentioned earlier, SECP is more on the policy side of things, whereas the PSX primer is the right document to turn to for local context in reporting. Okay, then we have Shakib Ilahi Saab, and he is asking, has PSX established a central office to help navigate listed companies in their ESG journey? I'm unsure if they have a separate office, but they have developed the task force to help companies with their ESG journey, and it is due to the efforts of the task force that PSX has launched its ESG primer. Um, so before we close today's session, I am pleased to hand it over to my colleague Minha, who will share a quick overview of our newly launched biomass service. And this is an exciting extension of our carbon market work. It's focused on turning agricultural residue into verified carbon assets. So over to you, Minha.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Hi. So thank you. Before we close today's session, I wanted to give you a quick preview of our upcoming webinar that focuses on a very exciting frontier, biomass-based energy projects in the carbon market. So biomass energy projects offer a real opportunity for companies who wish to turn their emission reductions into bankable climate assets. And Pakistan's biomass industry has immeasurable potential for it. So whether you're in the manufacturing, agro processing, or waste management, this session aims to help you understand the methodology requirements and how to turn carbon into carbon credits. So if this is a conversation that interests you, be sure to stay tuned for more updates. And the best way to do that is to follow us on our social. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.